Hi again. My name is Naomi Hattaway. I'm the founder of Leaving Well, the firm and agency that supports the reality that people leave. And I help with my team, help support nonprofits and other social impact organizations to be better about the reality that people leave through interim director and CEO coverage when you have a gap at your organization, and through proactive efforts such as succession planning, which is what we'll be talking about today. Our team also supports transitions. When you have an upcoming one that you know about, we step in to sit beside you and work alongside you to make sure that that transition is smooth. So I'm launching a six-part series today. All of these episodes will be published right in the time that the conclave is happening with the Pope in 2025. The Pope has just passed away, and the conclave is what people are talking about. And so I'm excited to talk to you about white smoke. This is the topic of this, or the title of this first conversation, white smoke, what the conclave can teach us about succession planning. So the question that often people talk about is, why are we so bad at succession planning? Why is it something that only a few people do or a few organizations do? Why is it something that a few only prioritize? And I think it's interesting because when we think about the reality, we watch organizations implode or quietly fall apart after charismatic founders depart. We also witness nonprofits or other social impact organizations kind of drift into mission fog when long-term executives or founders step down. And in the business world, we also see family businesses dissolve into soap opera-worthy feuds the minute succession becomes necessary. And yet there exists an institution that has managed to survive leadership transitions for over 2 millennia. The Catholic Church's conclave is an intriguing smoke signal process of selecting a new pope, and it represents history's most enduring succession system. Regardless of your feelings or relationship to Catholicism itself, there is something remarkable about an organization that has weathered 2,000 years of transition. So, what can we learn from this process? Quite a bit, as it turns out, and I'm here to share with you this first conversation in a series of six. We're going to explore the foundational structure and procedural elements of the conclave, as well as talk about how having pre-established processes, a deliberative decision space, and clear closure rituals all benefit succession planning. So during this conversation, I've got my notes on another screen, so I'll be looking over there quite a bit. Don't mind me as I read my notes. So the first thing to really talk about is that the structure for a successful succession plan procedure, the structure must exist before the need arises. I'll say that again because it's really important. The structure must exist before the need arises. Now, I'm not suggesting your nonprofit burn voting cards to produce the white smoke like the conclave when you select your next executive director or CEO, although I would attend that board meeting. What I am suggesting that we talk about meticulous succession machinery. So after diving into Robert Harris's novel Conclave and its recent film adaptation, I really got fascinated, honestly, by the Vatican's succession policy as opposed to the more typical and much more common haphazard, like we'll figure it out when we need to approach. That's what dominates most organizations, is the haphazard way. The succession process, though, with the Vatican does not begin when a pope dies or resigns. In fact, it just quietly waits in the wings along the way. It's a dormant system that is ready to be activated at a moment's notice. Meanwhile, most organizations, like we just talked about, do not start succession planning until the moving boxes appear in the CEO's office. The Catholic Church acknowledges that people leave with a well thought out plan. And so here's our first crucial lesson. The structure exists before the vacancy occurs. In Conclave, if you've read the book or watched the movie, Cardinal Lamelli does not need to invent a selection process when the Holy Father dies. He doesn't frantically Google, quote, how to choose a new pope, end quote, or call an emergency meeting to figure out voting procedures. Quite on the contrary, the system, with its ballots, its supermajority requirements, and even its sequestration protocols, springs into action immediately. Compare that to the panic scrambling that most boards experience when a founder announces their departure or when another reason for their exit arises. Suddenly, everyone's asking questions that should have been answered a long time ago. What exactly does our leader do? What qualities should we look for in a successor? Who's responsible for maintaining relationships with key donors during the transition? The conclave doesn't waste time on these fundamental questions because they were established centuries ago. The cardinals can focus entirely on the actual decision at hand. So the next kind of theme I want to talk about is the power of closing the door. But wait, I hear you thinking, isn't the conclave wildly secretive and totally non-transparent, which is why things like the movie and the book Conclave are such all the rage right now, is because we all want a glimpse into the process. And isn't it the opposite of good governance when you have secretive decision making and lack of transparency? My answer to that is yes and no. The conclave's extreme isolation, meaning the cardinals are literally locked away from the world with no phones, no internet, or outside contact, represents both its most medieval aspect and one of its greatest strengths. So the conclave creates what I call decision space. It's an environment where deliberative thinking can actually take place. This isolation forces cardinals to engage with each other directly rather than performing for outside audiences. It's not about secrecy for secrecy's sake. It's about creating conditions where authentic deliberation can occur without the distorting effects of external pressure. Most organizations don't have a decision space. Most organizations, like we've talked about already, haven't even discussed how they make decisions as a team, let alone thoughtful processes for endings and transitions. These organizations conduct succession planning in the same fragmented, distracted environment where they make every other decision, sandwiched between budget reviews and program updates in regular board meetings with everyone checking their phone. I'm curious at this moment if you stop and just kind of check in with yourself. Is this resonating with you? Does this feel like your experience at your nonprofit? The conclave teaches us that consequential decisions require consecrated space. Now, the Pope's long game really is about succession planning through appointment. And here's where things really get interesting. Every single living Pope is actively engaged in succession planning through their power to appoint cardinals. Each time a Pope puts the red hat on a new cardinal's head, he is potentially selecting his own successor, or at a minimum, someone who will vote for his successor. It's succession planning by proxy, and it's breathtakingly strategic. In Conclave, the author Harris provides and portrays options to learn about how different factions within the College of Cardinals represents the appointees of different popes. The conservative cardinals appointed under one papacy battle the progressive cardinals appointed by another. Each pope's appointees carry forward their vision, creating continuity even when the specific outcome isn't controlled. Now, this dynamic should feel similar and familiar to anyone who served on a nonprofit board or served in executive leadership. It might look like a founder who carefully selects board members that are aligned with their vision, or the executive director who promotes folks to key positions before announcing their retirement, or the board chair who strategically recruits new board members to maintain control over organizational direction. We all engage in this kind of this succession planning by proxy. We just rarely acknowledge it as explicitly as the Vatican does. And here's the fascinating twist. Despite this strategic appointment power, popes can't actually control who succeeds them. One of the previous popes appointed conservative cardinals, yet they ultimately then elected Francis, who pursued a somewhat different direction. The system allows for influence without guaranteeing control, which is a delicate balance that prevents both chaotic discontinuity and stifling predetermination. So let's talk about white smoke and the psychological closure that brings. When a new pope is selected, white smoke billows from the Sistine Chapel chimney. It's theatrical, it's dramatic, it's ancient. It's also well attended. There are multiple videos and news clips of crowds outside of the Sistine Chapel groaning and audibly being upset when the black smoke comes out of that chimney, which indicates that there has not been a two-thirds majority vote. When the white smoke billows out, a cheer erupts. The visual signal is psychologically brilliant. Before watching Conclave, like I said before, the white smoke was all really I knew about the process to select a new pope. The visual signal also provides what few leadership transitions ever offer, a clear, undeniable moment of closure and a new beginning. There is a before the white smoke, and there's an after the white smoke, which is visible from everyone, from the cardinals to the faithful in St. Peter's Square to observers worldwide. Most organizational transitions lack this clarity. The outgoing leader lingers as an advisor, and P.S. My recommendation, my strong recommendation, if the leader chooses not to make a clean break, is that they serve as an advisor. I never recommend that they join the board. That is one of the worst decisions that I think that can be made. The incoming leader gradually assumes responsibilities, and the handover, if there's overlap, can sometimes stretch over months or years, creating confusion about who's really in charge. The conclave's white smoke teaches us that the psychological importance of clean transitions is really seriously important. People need to know when one chapter is ended and another has begun. We need symbolic moments that help process the emotional reality of change. What is your organization's version of white smoke? What clear signal tells everyone, staff, board members, clients, donors, the actual community you serve, that transition has officially occurred? The next thing I want to talk about is the grief room. Perhaps the most overlooked aspect of the conclave process, and maybe the one that I was most excited to learn about, and the one most lacking in conventional succession planning, is the integration of grief and mourning. Before the conclave begins, the church observes a mandatory 9-day mourning period. I don't know if I'm going to say this right. I think it's Novem Dialis. This isn't just religious tradition, it's a psychologically, here's that word again, elevated succession practice. There's so much about conclave in this practice that is very psychologically intentional. In the book and in the movie, cardinals are portrayed processing their grief collectively before making decisions about the future. Again, Cardinal Lamelli struggles with personal loss while managing the process. The novel reveals how established rituals provide structure during emotional turmoil, allowing space for both mourning and forward movement. Now, when I work with teams, when we are processing and I'm sitting alongside the transition, one of the big and most important things that we do is navigate the staff's reaction and relationship to change and transition. It is one of the most important things that you can do when you think about succession and sustainability of your organization after transitions. Most nonprofits offer no such space for emotional processing. We celebrate departing leaders at awkward goodbye parties, and then we immediately pivot to, quote, exciting new chapters, end quote. We don't acknowledge the complex feelings, loss, anxiety, and sometimes even relief that accompany a leadership change. Here's what I want you to remember. The conclave reminds us that effective succession is not just about procedures and candidates. It's about the psychological journey of an entire community through a period of profound change. Now we're going to talk a little bit about procedure. So first, supermajority and consensus building. Another fascinating aspect of the conclave is its voting requirement. A successful papal election requires a 2/3 supermajority. This isn't just an arbitrary threshold. It forces consensus building rather than simple majority. It also prevents a narrow faction from imposing its will, and it requires candidates to appeal beyond their base of natural supporters. Again, in the book, Harris portrays how the system necessitates multiple rounds of voting, which allows for reflection and coalition building. Initial frontrunners often fail as the process forces deeper consideration of what the institution truly needs. Compare this to how most organizations make succession decisions, which is simple majority votes, decisions made by small executive committees, or in some cases, founders simply handpicking their successors without meaningful consultation. The conclave supermajority requirement acknowledges that succession is not just about finding a competent leader. It's about finding one who can truly unify disparate elements of an organization. This process also prioritizes consensus over efficiency, recognizing that a leader selected through superficial agreement will struggle to govern effectively. It's an interesting thought, isn't it? My question for you is, what would change in your organization's succession process if you required broader consensus? What trade-offs would you make between efficiency and unity? Note, I strongly suggest and recommend that organizations thoughtfully consider the differences between identifying a name for a successor versus naming a role when you're navigating your organization's succession plan. If you'd like to learn more about this, I've got a one-pager I can send you. Just email me at naomi@8thandhome.com. That's 8th, the number 8, THANDHOME.com, and I will send that over. So now we're wrapping up with this conversation, and I want to offer some questions for you to consider that maybe don't have easy answers. As I reflect on the strange wisdom of the conclave, I'm left with these questions. How do we create decision spaces that allow for deep deliberation while maintaining appropriate transparency? How do we honor institutional continuity while enabling necessary evolution and transformation? How do we acknowledge the emotional dimensions of leadership transitions without getting stuck in grief? How do we balance the need for consensus with the urgency of decisive action? These questions do not lend themselves to quick fixes, a simple checklist, or five-step plans. They require us to hold contradictions and to balance competing values. They also ask us to think systematically about processes that we typically approach haphazardly or reactively. This brings me back to where we started. Why are we so bad at succession planning? Perhaps because we haven't recognized it as the complex, multi-dimensional challenge that it truly is. We treat it as a hiring process simply, or something that we reluctantly have to do, rather than an existential transition that we get to tend. We focus on candidates rather than systems. We prioritize skills and experience over cultural fit and evolutionary potential. The conclave, for all of its peculiarities, at least understands the gravity of the task. It creates space, time, and structure that is commensurate with the importance of the decision. What would it look like if your organization approached succession with similar seriousness? What if you created your own conclave, not with red robes and secret ballots, of course, but with intentional processes that were designed for the weight of the moment? In part 2 of the series, we're going to explore the dynamics and politics that simmer just beneath the surface of succession planning, the hidden agendas, the factional battles, and the personal ambitions that shape these crucial transitions. In the meantime of that, I welcome you to check out our website, naomihattaway.com, where you can learn more about the services that we offer. You can also deep dive into 3 seasons of the podcast, or check out our articles. Again, if you want to get a hold of us, you can email me at naomi@eighthandhome.com. Until next time, thanks for watching and listening. Bye-bye. Da 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 da